Did you know that if you are an average American, now I know everybody here is above average, but if you're an average American, you make 35,000 conscious decisions every day. If you're an average American, you make 35,000 decisions and choices every day. This is according to a recent study at Cornell University. Now, granted, the vast majority of those decisions are very small, very trivial decisions that you barely really think about. They're decisions like, what shirt am I going to wear today? Or am I going to take this parking place or keep looking? Or am I going to like this post on Facebook or Instagram? Or all kinds of other just choices. About 250 of your daily choices are food related. What am I going to drink? Tea, sweet tea, unsweet tea. Chicken sandwich, Chick-fil-A or Popeyes? It's Chick-fil-A, by the way. How much butter am I going to put on my baked potato? How many pads of butter? How many spoonfuls of gravy am I going to put on my potatoes? As much as possible. There are decisions that you may not think of as decisions or choices, but you make 35,000 choices a day. And this same study at Cornell University says there are different personality types and different ways that people make decisions, different strategies for making decisions. And it lists 6 ways that people make decisions and choices. One is impulsiveness. This is people who just make decisions based on kind of the first thing that strikes their fancy, just the most upfront thing, the thing that's the first choice. They just always pick the first choice. Impulsiveness is why they put all those candy bars at the checkout stand. They call those impulse buys. Because you didn't go into Walmart thinking you needed a Snickers bar, but you're at the checkout stand, oh, well, yeah, I'll get a Snickers bar. That's impulsiveness. And some people make their choices impulsively. Another way of making decisions is compliance. And that's choosing the most pleasing, the most comfortable, the most popular choice. It's kind of going along with the crowd. I'm going to choose this because that's what everybody else is choosing. How shall I wear my hair? Well, the mullet seems really popular. I guess I'll go with the mullet. It's just choosing whatever seems popular at the time and going along with the crowd. Another decision-making strategy is delegating, which is not making the decision yourself, but trying to put it off on somebody else, pushing it off on someone else, which is what happens every time a group of people has to decide where to go to eat. Where do you want to go? I don't know. Where do you want to go? Well, what do you feel like? Well, I don't know. What do you feel like? Well, what do you think would be a good choice? Well, where do you want to go? I don't care. Well, you pick. Well, no, you pick. That happens anytime 2 or more people are trying to decide on a restaurant. It's delegating it to somebody else, which is closely to the other way of making decisions, which is avoidance and deflection, which is either avoiding decisions or ignoring decisions and doing that in an effort to avoid any responsibility for those decisions or their impact. What color shall we paint our son's room? Can't we just wait until he grows up and does it himself? Do I have to pick something now? Or, I don't know, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, avoiding making decisions, deflecting making decisions. Now, a better way is balancing. Balancing is the old idea. Let me pull out the yellow legal pad. Let me draw a line down the middle. Now, maybe that's not the modern way to do it, but let me write on the left side all the pros and on the right side all the cons. Let's figure out all the reasons I should do X on this side, all the reasons I should do Y on the other side, and let's figure out which side makes more sense. It's balancing. It's like, how shall we spend the money to make the new bedroom look better? New curtains, Batman statue. Which of these two is going to be the better choice? Let's write it out on a pad and see which one makes more sense. But the final way of making decisions and choices that Cornell lists is called prioritizing and reflecting. prioritizing and reflecting. And that's where you put the most energy and thought and effort into those decisions that will have the greatest impact. Let me read that again. Prioritizing and reflecting is putting the most energy, the most thought, and the most effort into the decisions that will have the greatest impact. Not every choice is a big deal. Some choices are very minor and insignificant and trivial. You put your priority into what are the biggest decisions that will really make a difference. What are the decisions that will really have the biggest impact on my life and on my friend's life and on my family's life? And how do I prioritize those decisions? And those priority decisions is what the passage of Scripture is about today from Joshua. Now, I've been talking about Joshua for a couple of weeks, and just to remember who Joshua is, Joshua started out as a young man. He's Moses' sort of assistant and protege. He's one of the scouts who goes into the promised land, and 12 of them come back, and 10 of them say, yeah, we can't take this land. It's impossible. The people there are too big, too strong. And only 2, Joshua and Caleb, say, well, if the Lord wants us to do it, we can do it. But they get voted down, and because of that, the people of Israel wander for 40 years. All the adults die off until the only 2 of the original adults left are Joshua and Caleb. And Moses dies, and Joshua becomes the leader of the people of Israel. He succeeds Moses. We talked about how God gave him these instructions to be strong and courageous. And then last week we talked about that moment when they finally crossed into the promised land. They crossed over the Jordan River, which God had stopped up, and they cross over on dry land, and they cross into Canaan, and they set up a monument so they'll always remember that miracle, and they actually begin to take occupancy of the promised land. Now, for chapters after that in the book of Joshua, it's frankly a lot of battles. Joshua and the people of Israel are fighting the Canaanites for the land. They start with the city of Jericho, probably the most famous battle where the walls came a-tumbling down, and there's battle after battle. We're not going to talk about all those battles, but the upshot is Israel is able to carve out a country. Israel takes the promised land. And once they take the promised land, they divide it into the land for each of the 12 tribes. This tribe gets this piece of land. This tribe gets this piece of land. And they have sort of a time of peace. And they settle in. And by the time they do all that, Joshua's an old man. And he knows his days are numbered. He knows he's going to die soon. So he gives a farewell speech, a farewell address to the people of Israel. And what we read a moment ago was just a piece of that farewell address. And the crucial part that we read is where he says, you've got to make some choices. Now that we've won these battles, now that we've occupied the land that God promised to our ancestors, to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, now that we have the land, you're going to have to make some choices and decisions. Who are you going to serve? Whom are you going to serve? Are you going to serve the gods back in Egypt? That your ancestors were in slavery in Egypt? Those gods like Ra and Osiris and Anubis? Are you going to serve Egyptian gods? Are you going to serve the gods of the people we've been fighting, the Canaanites? Are you going to serve Baal and Asherah and Molech and the other Canaanite gods? Or are you going to serve the one true God, the Lord, Yahweh, Jehovah, El Shaddai? Are you going to serve the one true God, the God of our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God who spoke to Moses, the God who's been fighting for us and leading us? Are you going to serve the Lord? He says, you're going to have to make a choice. And he says, I'm going to tell you what my choice is for my household, for my family, for me and my household. We're going to serve the Lord. That's our decision. Our household has chosen to serve the Lord. And that phrase, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord, people have that on plaques in their house. People have it on signs in their house. As for me and my house, we'll serve the Lord. And that theme of making those kinds of choices isn't just in this one passage. It's all through the Bible. All through the Bible, over and over, people have to decide and choose who are they going to serve. Who are they going to serve? Who are they going to worship? You go forward about 400 years in the Bible, in the book of Kings, and the people of Israel have made a lot of bad choices. And they've had a lot of problems because of their bad choices. And they've had a lot of bad kings. And about the worst king they ever had was this king named Ahab. And he had an even worse wife as queen named Jezebel. And they led the people into worshiping pagan gods and idols because Jezebel was a foreign princess. And Ahab had married her, and she brought all of her foreign gods and foreign priests and foreign prophets with her. And Israel began to be corrupted by this. And they hadn't totally given up on the Lord, but they were also worshiping all these idols. They were kind of having it both and. And in the middle of that awful time, God raised up a prophet named Elijah, the greatest of the prophets in the Old Testament. And Elijah could see that the people of Israel, they just couldn't decide. Are we going to worship the Canaanite gods? Or are we going to worship the one true God, the God of our forefathers? And that's why he goes before the people, this prophet named Elijah. This is we find this in the book of Kings, 1 Kings 18:21. He says this, Elijah went before the people and said, "How long will you waver between two opinions?" The old King James has it as, "How long will you limp between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. If Baal is God, follow him. Make a choice, people. Choose a side." It says, but the people said nothing because they were in that avoidance deflection mode. Well, do we really have to pick? And so Elijah makes the decision a little bit easier for them to make. He says, well, let's have a showdown. And he says to all the prophets that Jezebel had brought with her from her country, you guys believe Baal is God. I know that the Lord is the real God. Let's build two altars and put animal sacrifices on it. And then you pray to Baal, and I'll pray to the Lord, and we'll see which one sends fire to burn up the sacrifice. You may know this story. The prophets of Baal, they scream and cry and dance and cut themselves for hours and hours and hours, pleading on Baal to send fire. Nothing happened. Elijah showboats, pours water all over his sacrifice, then asks the Lord to send fire. Zap, fire comes. And the people go, oh, the Lord really is the real God. He really is. The people finally make a choice, a decision. Now, that happens all through the Old Testament. A prophet says to the people, make a choice. Now, by the time we get to the New Testament, the people of Israel are no longer really tempted to be following Baal or Asherah or Molech. That's pretty much fallen out of favor. But there are still temptations that are rivals for God, rivals for allegiance, rivals for worship. The choices start to sound a little bit more modern in the New Testament. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says this over in Matthew 6. He says, no one can serve two masters. Can't have two masters, can't have two lords, can't have two bosses. Either you'll hate one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to one and despise the other. You can't serve both God and money. See, money had become much more of a rival to God than Baal or Molech or Asherah or Osiris or Ra. Money had become the most obvious rival for people's allegiance. And that was 2,000 years ago, and it's probably still true today. He says you can't serve God and money. You can't make both God and money your master. But you can substitute almost any word for money there. And it's the same dilemma. You can't put anything in the place of God. Even a good thing. You can't put a good thing in the place of God or a bad thing in the place of God. Let's take money. Money's a great tool. Money is great. You can do great things with money. Money makes a great tool. And money makes a lousy master. Let me say that again. Money makes a great tool, but a lousy master. If you use money as a tool, you can do amazing things. But if you are a slave to money, your life is not going to be a happy life. If money is your God, if money's your master, your life's not going to work. But you can substitute anything, any good thing. If your job is your God, if your hobby is your God, if sports is your God, none of those make a good God. Of course, bad things make it even worse God. If alcohol is your God, if drugs are your God, if pornography is your God, anything that has control over you, something that has control over you is your God, is your master. If it controls you, then it's your God. And Jesus says you can't serve two masters. You can only have one master. You can only have one boss. You can only have one Lord. Now, some of us kind of stiffen at the words master and Lord, because the word master has a lot of negative baggage attached to it, and the word Lord is like really old-fashioned word. And we kind of say, well, I'm an American, and nobody's the boss of me. You can't be the boss of me, and, I'm my own boss. Well, if you're your own boss, you're still in trouble. Because if you put yourself in the place of God, your life's not going to work. Everybody's going to serve someone or something. And thankfully, Jesus is my boss. He's the boss of me. Jesus is my boss, my master, not because I'm a pastor, because I'm a Christian. Jesus is my Lord and my master, and my hope and prayer is that he is yours too. Who you serve is a choice. Now, it's not an impulsive choice. How do you make this choice that Jesus is your master? It's not on impulse. I mean, some people go to a Christian concert or go to a retreat or a camp, and they say, I'm going to give my life to Jesus. And they kind of do it on impulse, and 2 weeks later they forget all about it. It's not just an impulsive choice. It's a choice that you say, yes, this is the direction my life is going to go. Not on impulse, but because it's a decision of the heart and the mind and the spirit. It's not an impulsive choice. It's not a choice that you just do to go along with the crowd, to comply with the crowd. It's not a choice that you can delegate to your parents or your spouse or somebody else in your family. It's not a choice that you can just keep avoiding and deflecting and thinking, well, I'll think about that later. Maybe on my deathbed, when I'm almost dead, I'll think about that. No, that doesn't work either. It's a choice. Who are you going to serve? Who are you going to serve is a choice that's the most important choice of your life. Who's my boss? Who's my Lord? Who's my master? I read a little story about a farmer, and he hired a hired man to work on his farm. Big, strong guy, and he said, well, you're going to have you do a lot of chores here around the farm. First thing he said, I want you to paint the barn. It'll probably take you about 4 days to paint this big old barn. Well, the guy finished it in 2 days. And the farmer was really impressed with this new hired hand. He did it in half the time, and it looked great. He's like, well, all right, well, the next thing I want you to do, he says, is I want you to split up all this wood into firewood. Gave him an axe. He said, it'll probably take you about 3 or 4 days to do all this wood. The guy did it in a day and a half. And the farmer's really impressed that he chopped up all that wood so quick and had it all piled up nice. He said, well, here at the farm we grow a lot of things. One of the things we grow here at the farm is potatoes. And the potatoes, we've already picked them, but here's a big pile of potatoes. And some of them we're going to take to market to sell at the farmer's market, but some of them are too small and ugly. We just feed those to the pigs. So separate the potatoes into the good potatoes that we can sell and the bad potatoes that we're going to feed to the hogs. He said that should take you about a day. The pile's not that big. Take you about a day to do that. Came back at the end of the day. The pile was pretty much all still there. He says, well, what happened? You were working so fast and so good and so efficiently, and you haven't gotten hardly anything done. What's wrong? And the farmhand said, well, I can work fast and I can work hard, but I can't make decisions. I can't make decisions. He was paralyzed by trying to make a decision, good or bad, market or hog. We can't be paralyzed. We got to make choices. Now, you make all those little bitty choices. All of us make the little choices every day. Pepperoni or sausage. Or half and half, maybe. Blue pants or brown pants? Oh, the light's turning yellow. Do I screech to a halt or do I gun it? You should stop. We have all these choices that we sometimes don't really think about as choices, but because we kind of make them without really thinking about it too much. But all of our lives have a handful of big decisions. What's my career going to be? Am I going to get married? If so, who am I going to marry? Where am I going to live? Are we going to have kids someday? These are the big life decisions, the big choices. But the biggest life decision and the biggest choice you make in your life, who will I serve? Who will be my master? Because someone or something is going to be your master. Whom will I serve? My prayer for every single one of us is that we are like Joshua and that we can say, as for me and my house, we'll serve the Lord. Let's pray.